SpaghettiOs, what is crack-a-lackin'? You already know Brian's super pumped. I'm super pumped, obviously.
Roll Tide, baby, let's go. Roll Tide.
All right, no, not Roll Tide, but obviously it's episode 32. That's one of the things we're going to discuss about in a little bit. Obviously, Bama had a big win over LSU. Bryant was there, actually.
I was there, and it was electric. I've never heard Bryant Denny so loud in recent years. Like loudest environment I've seen it since I've been going to Bama games. Probably one of the best games I've ever seen. Alabama LSU never disappoints. It's always a great game. It's always a fun matchup. Probably better than that other matchup that's in 2 weeks between another set of Tigers that Bama will play. Well, that's in-state, but anyway, that'll be a few weeks. But yeah, it was a great weekend, great game to be at. And sorry, he was gonna go, but he checked out on me.
I had formalities to go to, so it is what it is. But, I mean, speaking of Alabama, yeah, we'll dive into that. I also want to look a little bit into some Big Ten information. Obviously, some more on the Michigan sign-stealing scandal, some more on some potential other Big Ten teams also doing the same.
Also, the second set of playoff rankings come out. There's some interesting scenarios, especially with Alabama's big win over LSU. If Bama were to win out, could they possibly still be left out, even as a one-loss SEC champion? There is a path for that to happen. We can discuss that. And USC finally fired Alex Grinch.
Yep. Took long enough,
but finally that's happened.
We'll go into that a little bit. Yeah.
A lot of stuff has transpired over the weekend and the first half of this week. It is exciting to talk about.
And also, there's a little bit with the Big Ten I want to dive into. I don't even know if you know what I'm talking about yet because I didn't share this with you, which we'll get into. And then our guest picker this week for our Week 11 Pick'em segment is none other than Brandon McCartney, Colorado super fan, diehard Colorado fan. I think that already gives away one of our games of the week this week. Obviously Colorado, but Brandon's coming on. He's got a huge fan base for Colorado. All Colorado fans love Brandon. They all know who he is. Very involved in the community too. And can't wait to bring Brandon on and see what his picks are for the week. Obviously, I mean, I'm assuming he's going to pick Colorado. I don't know why he would ever pick against Colorado.
It's just a great time to be alive. Bama beat LSU. We got Brandon coming on. OG Fortnite is back. They're announcing GTA 6. I mean, good Lord, what a time to be alive. NCAA game is coming back next year.
What a week.
Hopefully we live to see it, with everything going on in the world. But anyway, let's get into segment one, man.
Let's dive right into it.
Before we start segment one is sponsored by Now Fitness. Now Fitness is a gym and fitness center based in Grove Hill, Alabama. They do personal training, group sessions with CrossFit and other workouts, and they help the local athletes train and get in their best shape. Call 251-269-3065 for more, and go hit the gym, man.
Yeah, got to hit the gym. And, man, LSU's probably wishing that they hit the gym.
Jay Daniels especially.
Trying to figure out a way to stop Jalen Milroe with using his legs and his rushing ability.
Hits the gym for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely does. Just taking a look at him, every football player obviously hits the gym. I'm not really sure about them hitting Now Fitness, which they should, but jokes aside, I mean, Alabama really got the job done this past week against LSU in T-Town. Obviously, it was a tie game at the half. I'm not sure how you were feeling when you were there with going into the second half. But Bama got it done in the second half.
This was definitely a game of the quarterbacks until Jay Daniels got hurt. I was sad to see him go out the way he did. I do not think the hit that Dallas Turner put on Jay Daniels was dirty. I do think it was worthy of roughing the passer, which it was called for. I don't think it was targeting. It could have been. There definitely was an argument there, but I personally don't think it was targeting. I do think it was worthy of the roughing the passer call it got, but it was tough to see Jaden Daniels go out that way. But both these teams, quarterbacks led their teams in rushing. Jaden Daniels with only 11 carries, 163 yards and a touchdown. Jalen Milroe with 20 carries, which has probably more carries he's had in one game, and he's had more carries in that one game than he's probably had all season, with 155 yards and four touchdowns. And man, he finally the offense was finally tailored to his strengths. He finally He finally ran some more QB runs. He finally had the clock in his head where if his first or second read wasn't there and the pocket was collapsing, to get out and go, and you saw that. And it was just exciting to watch, and I think he's getting more and more confident each week, and that's going to help them.
Easily. And speaking of their offense, obviously, yes, it was an offensive shootout on both ends. But the way that Bama's defense was able to slow down the LSU offense, obviously, LSU's offense has been elite all year long.
And they were leading. They scored. Bama let them score with 5 seconds left to go in the first half, and that gave LSU back the momentum. And then they came out in the second half, scored with the ball on their first drive, and they didn't score another point the rest of the night.
But you got to think, too, Malachi Moore coming in clutch on that 4th down, then other things with, that pick from Terry Arnold. Yeah, there was tipped up by Dallas Turner.
Yep, Dallas Turner.
Yeah, seriously. And, I mean, there were some big things to be excited about as an Alabama fan. Because going into that game, I think that was one of the biggest questions, was if Bama's defense could get it done. Because obviously, you knew it was going to be a shootout on both ends. You knew LSU's offense was going to come to play, which they did, but your defense shut them out when you needed to. Obviously, LSU didn't score at all in the 4th quarter, and that was exactly what you needed out of the defense.
And a big part of that was the crowd. The crowd, in Bryant-Denny Stadium, the crowd, the last 2 games against Tennessee and against LSU, definitely helped out with some penalties on LSU's offense and slowed them down on certain drives. It was loud. It was electric. I mean, like I said before, in the opening, LSU and Alabama never disappoints. It's always an exciting game. It's always a fun matchup. These 2 teams are usually ranked, and it's usually for the SEC West. It's always and it never disappoints. And this was a great game up until Bama started kind of pulling away in the 4th quarter. But now this kind of leads into, discussion on whether or not, if Bama wins out, and we saw the latest playoff rankings. They still had Bama and Texas behind Oregon, which I don't think is if the committee I said this earlier in the week when the night they came out with the rankings. If they're going to use resume to justify putting Ohio State 1, and no doubt Ohio State's resume is better than Georgia up to this point. Now, if Georgia beats Ole Miss this weekend, now you could a top 10 Ole Miss team. You could argue Georgia's resume is better. I see you wiping your eyes and whatnot.
No, I was doing that because I actually had to wipe my eyes. But it is an interesting scenario. And I mean, the same thing from that goes to the Big Ten, too, with how it plays out with Penn State, Michigan this weekend and Ohio State, Michigan. But it's one of those weird scenarios to see just how it plays out getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, because like I said, if they're gonna use resume to justify putting Ohio State 1, they should use resume. And don't get me wrong, Oregon is a phenomenal team. Bo Nix is great. Their offense is great. Dan Lanning is a great coach. But the only ranked team they've beaten is Utah, and Utah's kind of sliding a little bit now. They could beat Washington this weekend, but they couldn't. But Oregon couldn't beat Washington on the road. Texas and Bama have more ranked wins. There are only 3 teams in the country with 3 ranked wins. It's Bama, Texas, and Arizona. Of course, Texas has the huge win at Alabama. Texas also has the win against Kansas State and against who else they beat? They beat another ranked team. I can't think of it, but they also beat another ranked team. And Alabama has the win against a top 10 Ole Miss team. They just beat LSU and Tennessee. They went to A&M and beat A&M on the road. And so I think Oregon and Texas. I think Bama and Texas should be ahead of Oregon. But this brings up the scenario if. Okay, Michigan or Ohio State, they're going to probably go undefeated. One of those teams are going to go undefeated and win the Big Ten championship.
Yep.
Okay.
One of those teams is automatically in.
Yes. Okay. An undefeated Florida State ACC champion is going to get in. If an undefeated Washington wins the Pac-12, undefeated, they're going to get in. This begs the question: if Alabama wins out, beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, becomes a one-loss SEC champion, but Texas runs the table as well, and they beat, right now, I think Oklahoma State has the inside track to the Big 12 to face Texas in the Big 12 championship game after that huge win at OU, which, by the way, you called that.
I did call that.
I was shocked, believe me. But if those 2 teams went out and it comes down to those 2 teams, who do you put in? And the obvious answer to anybody will say Texas because they have the win to win, or they have the head. I don't know why I said win to win. They have the head-to-head win at Alabama on the road, but that was in week 2, and you've seen that this is clearly a more different Alabama team than in week 2.
Than it was, yeah, exactly. And I mean, the thing is too, it boils down to it's a week 2 loss. Like the same thing happened 3 years ago. In Ohio State's the first year that they lost to Michigan in like 9 years, that week 2 they had a week 2 loss to Oregon in the same year, and then the rest of the year they were like out of the conversation, and then got themselves back into the conversation before they ended up losing to Michigan again. And it's a situation where Bama still surely could get in, even if Texas doesn't. And it's just such a fishy situation because then it makes you think about the facts. So say this weekend Penn State beats Michigan, and then Ohio State, God forbid, loses to Michigan. Who gets in at that point? And arguably, I've seen lots of articles saying that Penn State gets in because Penn State beat Michigan. But it's another fishy situation where it's like,
well, it's probably out of those 3, whoever gets in the Big Ten championship game, and probably. But I think even if Penn State beats Michigan and Michigan beats Ohio State, I still think it somehow comes down to Ohio State and Michigan. I don't know, but my thing though is like, when it comes down to Bama and Texas, like I said just a minute ago, obvious answer is Texas because they have the head-to-head win. But you could argue, especially with the way the committee has been arguing, resume, strength of schedule, strength of record. Bama has had since week 2, since Bama and Texas played on the field, Bama has had the harder schedule. They had to play Ole Miss, who's a top 10 team, who could very well, if Bama were to, God forbid, lose to Kentucky and Auburn. Anyway, I couldn't even fathom that happening. But they could still get into the SEC championship game, and they could run the table themselves. And then they also have the win against A&M on the road. They beat a top 20 Tennessee team at home. Then they just beat the most dynamic quarterback and the most dynamic offense in the country in LSU. While Texas, since the win against Bama, I don't want to say they've kind of skated by, but they did lose to Oklahoma, who now has 2 losses on their own, 2 straight losses,
and barely squeaked by Kansas State last week. I mean, that was a game that Kansas State could have won had they not gone for 2 on that first play of overtime after scoring.
Yeah,
and they kind of screwed themselves there. I don't know why they didn't just go for the field goal, the PAT attempt. I mean, I get it, their kicker was spotty too, so that's why they didn't go for it. But
and Bama, if they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, what other team in the top 10 has a better win than that? Other than you can argue Texas because Bama is the SEC championship game or is the SEC champion.
Another scenario you could throw in is say Louisville wins out and Louisville beats Florida State in the ACC championship. And both those teams, at that point, 11-1.
I still think it'd be Bama or Texas.
I still think it would be too, but I mean, that'd be really interesting too, seeing Louisville beat Florida State, where they would jump to, because I think they'd be maybe the last 2 out at that 5 or 6 spot at that point too. And that's just something else that you got to throw out there where it's like, what the heck? But I got another question that's kind of a what the heck question. What was Will Riker doing? Because he has been one of the best, probably arguably the best kicker in Nick Saban's tenure at Alabama, and 2 unusual missed field goals by him.
I think it just wasn't his night. I think comes a point where even the best kicker in the nation misses a couple, and he did, but thankfully it wasn't a factor.
Lucky it wasn't a factor.
It wasn't a factor. Now I will tell you my story on this because my buddy Cody, who we had on as our guest picker first week of the season, he came with me to the game and he bought a Will Riker jersey. I said, "What if that jinxes him? What if it comes down to a field goal tonight and it jinxes him?" And he's like, "He ain't gonna jinx him. He's money Riker. He's automatic." So we get to the first field goal. He has the Will Riker jersey on. The defense is actually playing phenomenal at this point. It's 14-7, and they've held they stopped Jaden Daniels on that 4th down, and Will Riker misses the field goal. And I'm like, you jinxed him, man. I'm like, you jinxed him. So he takes off the Will Riker jersey, puts on his Kool-Aid McKinstry jersey, and says, "All right, I'm not putting the jersey back on until he makes a field goal." Well, then the defense starts playing poorly, and I've said, what if the key for the defense is for you putting that Will Riker jersey back on, sacrifice And so he puts on the Will Riker jersey, and lo and behold, the defense doesn't give up a point the rest of the game.
You got to be kidding me. But then Will Riker missed another field goal.
But hey, you got to sacrifice one part of the game.
I think it's on Cody for that one, man.
Superstition, and I was telling Cody this on the way down the ramp, on the way back to the car. I said, superstition is real, and it happened tonight, and you witnessed it. So
no, it definitely is, but yeah.
That's just a joke, though. But that was the whole story. But anyway, that's it. But these are some interesting scenarios. This one between Bama and Texas. If the other three teams went out, if Bama wins out, if Texas wins out, it's definitely a big if conversation because these teams still have to win. Bama still has Kentucky this weekend. They still have the Iron Bowl. Then they have the potential huge matchup with Georgia. They still have to win that game. So it really...
And that game kind of is in Georgia's favor, too, with where the SEC championship is.
We own Georgia and Atlanta.
Okay.
But anyway, no, that's some definite like big if scenarios, but it is a scenario that could possibly very much happen. And so it just boils down to, if Bama can win out, if Texas can win out, and then if the other teams win out. Like if you have 3 undefeated teams against 1-loss teams, then you can also throw Georgia in there as a 1-loss team who didn't win their conference. I don't know.
It's a crazy mess. But
and then next year we won't be having this conversation.
Next year it'll be the top 12.
These teams like Bama would already be in. The top, at least top 8 would probably already be decided.
Yeah,
probably.
Seriously. Yeah, but. I mean, completely messy situation, but I think that's going to do it for our college football playoff kind of talk and lead into segment 2 where I want to go a little bit more into the Big Ten, just a tad bit, a little bit with Michigan, a little bit with some other stuff, but stay tuned for segment 2. Before we dive right into segment 2, we would like to thank our sponsor for segment 2, 251 Pool Works. They're family owned and operated. 251 Pool Works offers pool cleaning, maintenance, and repair. They serve the greater Mobile, Baldwin County, and Pensacola areas. And if you are needing any monthly pool cleaning, service, and or repair, give them a call at 251-978-7736 for the Pool Works. Can't thank them enough.
Yep. And if your pool looks as messy as this Michigan situation, please get it clean.
Yeah, and I mean this situation, diving right into it, obviously a little bit more Big Ten in this segment, but it's a fishy situation because obviously there's a lot going on, and Michigan, as of a few days ago, just ended up pulling out of their behinds that there's another Big Ten team that was potentially...
Give you a hint.
No, and it wasn't. The Michigan, I think, is just at this point trying to make excuses to the Big Ten to try and get them out of as sticky as the situation is.
Probably trying to soften the blow with whatever punishment will come.
Exactly, because there was a wild turn as Michigan alleged that Ohio State and Rutgers and a couple other teams were sharing Michigan signs, and it was more or less because of the fact that I think the allegation said that these teams went and watched Michigan in the Big Ten championship game when they played Iowa 2 years ago back in 2022 or 2021? Yeah, and that's what the thing is, but the thing is that's allowed per NCAA. When it's after your season's over, you can go and watch in a Big Ten championship game or a potential other championship game because you're not going to play that team anymore. Like Ohio State and Rutgers.
It's not the same team. I mean, it might be the same coaching staff or something, but the team will kind of be the same because of personnel.
Exactly. And so that's allowed, and it's more of a sportsmanship rule that Michigan was trying to say that these other teams were breaking. And it's ultimately just boils down to, I think, them trying to get themselves out of the hot water that they're in. Because obviously Michigan said if the Big Ten or NCAA, whatever they do, Michigan's seeking legal action right away.
They're going to fire back. And so this is a sticky situation, and they finally fired Connor Stallions. So that probably tells you a little bit about how this is going to go.
Yes, and the interesting thing, too, is for weeks, I was talking, some of my friends obviously are Michigan fans, which I hate, but they were trying to say for the longest time, because Ryan Day has a brother who is an attorney, I'm pretty sure, owns a law firm, whatever, And a lot of Michigan fans were trying to claim this whole time that Ryan Day's brother was behind the whole investigation. He's the one that started everything. And that came out earlier this past week that it was false. It had nothing to do with Ryan Day, nothing to do with any of Ryan Day's family. This was like a Big Ten NCAA thing that Ohio State had nothing to do with. Yeah. And obviously, it comes down to the fact that, and we've talked about it before in previous episodes, but Michigan was cheating. They got caught. It came down to that. And we'll see what happens, but there's lots to talk to. We talked about it yesterday in class. And
before we segue to our next topic, I don't think Michigan is the only team doing this. I think Michigan just somehow got caught. I think I've said this in an episode a couple weeks ago or last week, where they just got caught or somebody ratted them out. It could have been a former player. It could have been a former staff member. Because there was something that came out over the weekend, like that a staff member, and it was an anonymous former staff member, fed the NCAA documents. So I don't know. I think the thing we're all kind of trying to see is, what is the punishment going to be? What is the extent? What extent? Who knew about it? Michigan can fire Connor Stallions, but I don't think he was a lone wolf in this at all. I think Harbaugh knew. I don't know if any of the players knew. And I feel bad for the players because this season,
it shouldn't fall on them, and it sucks because of the season that they're having. They could have potential college football playoff hopes again.
They could win the whole thing, and
they could be ruined because of this whole thing.
And there's a lot of people out there, and I think Stephen A. said it on First Take either Monday or Tuesday. And there's some other people are starting to kind of say this, to where, especially with the playoff rankings, kind of each week we're getting closer and closer to the postseason. Should Michigan, if the NCAA closes their investigation before the postseason gets here, and it comes out that they did the sign stealing, should Michigan be able to compete in the college football playoff? And there's a lot of people, including maybe myself, who thinks probably not, even if they are undefeated.
I don't think they should either. And the interesting thing by the time this episode comes out, there could already be a punishment.
Something comes out about this every day.
Exactly, because the Big Ten gave a notice to Michigan earlier this week on Monday that they were going to have disciplinary action coming to Michigan. Yeah. And they said Michigan had until Wednesday, which is today while we're filming this, to respond to the potential disciplinary action. And everyone is saying that Jim Harbaugh is going to get suspended. Obviously, we don't know if that's going to for sure happen, but, it's just a sticky situation. Like Ryan Walters said it last week before kickoff for Purdue versus Michigan. He was ranting about the whole situation, about how Purdue had proof of Michigan staffers coming into Purdue games and stealing signs. Obviously, why would Michigan want to be stealing signs from Purdue?
Central Michigan could come out and say something about that.
And it's just a very sticky situation where it's like, why were they even kind of going into it against these crappier teams?
They didn't even need to cheat against this schedule this year. Good Lord.
Exactly. But it's just so sticky. And it really makes you question what is going to happen. What is going to be the repercussions for Michigan's actions? And I don't know, because I think that they will get suspended. Pending what's going on, nothing has happened yet.
I think Harbaugh getting suspended is the bare minimum. I think if it is true, I think that I don't know. I think, like I said, you'd have to find out the extent. What extent was this used? How far did they go? How far did they take this? Who in the building knew? Obviously, it started with Jim Harbaugh, and then it boiled down to or it trickled down to the other staff members. Then you start looking at players. Did players know? Did players get in on this? So really, and that's really what the NCAA has its hands full with here is finding out how far did it go, and then who all knew.
Exactly, and I think that's why we don't have an exact punishment yet, even though everybody wants something. And obviously I do too, but at the same time, yes, everyone steals signs. I know that Michigan got caught. But
as an Astros fan, I don't care.
Obviously you don't. But speaking of the Big Ten, aside from the cheating scandal, we talked about this a little bit during our break.
You ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
But you got to think the Big Ten right now have obviously every year, top 3 Big Ten teams are all in the Big Ten East. And you got to think it's always Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan.
And next year you're getting rid of divisions.
Yeah, next year there's no Big Ten East, no Big Ten West, but you're also adding USC, you're adding Oregon, you're adding Washington, you're also adding UCLA. And you got to think, with this added to the mix, to me right now, I want to ask you, Bryant, too, see how you feel about this, but who's going to be at the top of the Big Ten next year? Because you got to think, too, Oregon's losing Bo Nix, Washington's losing Michael Penix. But and then obviously going back to USC, obviously they just fired Alex Grinch. We talked about it before too. Little side note: USC has allowed 256 points in the last 6 games, which is just completely hideous. And
there was a video that's been circulating around the other than the Caleb Williams emotional video. Alex Grinch is in the huddle with his players, and he was trying to tell them something, and none of them were paying attention, and you could just tell that there was a lot of friction going on. Yeah. There was something not right there, and I think it's too little, too late. I don't think it's going to change their season whatsoever. But it is in the off season. It is going to be a huge sign on who Lincoln Riley decides to hire, because it's a big hire for USC. Probably even more important than I don't know. It's huge on who Lincoln Riley chooses to be,
especially with them going to the Big Ten next year, because they're
going to have a defense to play in the Big Ten.
Exactly, and that's the interesting thing. In looking at it next year, I think with the new additions, I think one of the only other teams that's going to compete in the Big Ten next year is Oregon. Even with losing Bo Nix, Dan Lanning is building Oregon like an SEC powerhouse team, and building in the trenches. He's getting the recruits that he needs, and I think Oregon, to start first 2-3 years in the Big Ten, is going to be the only new addition that can compete in the Big Ten.
I could see, like I said, depending on who Lincoln Riley hires as a DC, depending on what they do at quarterback after Caleb Williams. They got a freshman kid who's pretty good and very talented. He was very talented in high school, Malachi Nelson. He'll more than likely probably be the favorite to take over that starting job. UCLA. Dante Moore will have more games under his belt. Chip Kelly with the defense he's built there, which Chip Kelly teams normally don't have good defenses, so it's pretty cool to see UCLA have a good defense.
For once, yeah.
For once, but I think Washington could also, what Washington does in recruiting, how they replace Michael Penix Jr. Did they go back into the portal and get another quarterback? Because I think there's going to be a lot of transfer quarterbacks this year. I think Alabama's going to have a couple that transfer out. I think there's going to be a lot of transfer quarterbacks, man, and I think there could be a couple. I think there could be a one that they go in there and snag. I think it'll be an adjustment year for these teams. And it may not be. You might find yourself with Oregon even after losing Bo Nix,
still competing
and being right there with Ohio State, Michigan, and possibly Penn State, depending on
Oregon actually, too, is one of the few teams next year. I can't remember seeing it, but they're one of the few teams that could potentially play 18 games, potentially if they make the college football playoff, because they're playing an early week 0 game, and whatever it is, because they go and play Hawaii in a week 0 game to start the season off. But it's I'm pretty sure that game doesn't count. I can't remember if it's an exhibition game or something like that I saw, but I saw something where some college football media outlets were posting stuff where Oregon's going to have the most travel miles next year, and you got to think potentially playing 18 games if they were to make the playoffs.
And speaking of traveling, it's going to be interesting to see how the traveling affects not only the new teams coming in, but also the current Big Ten teams, because they're not used to having to fly out that far, say a couple weeks at a time, or 2 or 3 weeks at a time. So say you have Rutgers or Maryland, who's only as far east as you can get, and they got to go say back. I don't think they would, them Big Ten would have them do this, because I think it's kind of harsh. But say they have to go to USC and then turn around, go back to Washington back-to-back weeks. That take a toll on you.
Yeah,
and it's kind of the same with the SEC, with Texas and OU coming in, which out of these, and then we talked about it before. We had Big Game Boomer on in a couple episodes back in the summer, where which one of those teams is better equipped to compete right away in the SEC, and so it's interesting. But we still want to see how this season plays out.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it'll be interesting, and obviously top 25, we already talked about it, but
And like I said earlier in the episode, we were debating the college football playoff scenarios. I mean, it's coming quick. The season's close. Like the last college football season, as we've known college football for the last decade or so, is coming to an end. There's going to be a bunch of changes coming quickly, with these new teams coming into their new conferences, with the 12-team playoff. We won't be debating a top 4 next year. We'll be debating a top 12, and we'll be debating
group
of
the
top
5.
4 seed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because right now, too, literally, and I hate it, too, because all over social media, I saw...
Who gets home field advantage next year.
But I saw someone last night post, the hypothetical the top 12 with the playoff. Obviously, Tulane getting in the mix, getting the 12 seed. But when they posted it, some people didn't have some college football context to what the post was, because the top 4 seeds were Ohio State, Georgia, Florida State, and Washington. And Michigan was the 5 seed. And there was a ton of people, is Michigan the 5 seed? I'm like, if you knew and paid attention, you know that the top 4 seeds are the top 4 conference champions. And a lot of people were like, oh, this makes no sense. Why would Michigan be 5? And I'm like, it was going off current standings.
Yeah.
But I'm like, people need to realize that. Yeah, it pissed me off.
I mean, whether it's 4, whether it's 12, whether it's 68 like there is the NCAA tournament, there will always be those teams that felt left out, those fan bases that felt left out, that thought they deserved a shot, and they'll always complain. It doesn't matter how far. You can have 200 teams, you can have the entire 131 FBS teams just go on an all-out tournament, playoff tournament. And everybody gets a trophy. Everybody gets a participation trophy into the postseason, and people would still complain.
Yep.
So why their team was not a higher seed or stuff like that. So people, I mean, that's been my whole pet peeve about this expansion thing. It's mainly because people are complaining that their teams aren't getting shots in the top 4. Well, you're going to complain if they don't get a shot in the top 12. So it's it is what it is.
It's interesting, but we'll see, man. But can't thank y'all.
We're on a little mini rant there.
Yeah, literally a mini rant. But that's going to do it for our Big Ten talk and all that. But we can't wait for bringing on Brandon for our Week 11 college football.
We're going to see if he's wired, fired, and inspired, man.
Yeah, we will see. And, I mean... I'm assuming he's going to be picking Colorado. We'll see.
We'll see. He might indulge into an upset he might pick Arizona. You never know.
Yeah, but stay tuned for our picks, because obviously we got some interesting pick'em games this week too. But
good slate of games.
Yeah, let's bring on Brandon. Welcome to our Week 11 college football pick'em segment. This week, Bryant and I have special guest, Colorado superfan Brandon McCartney, picking this week's games. Obviously, Brandon's on. You already know that Arizona and Colorado are automatically on our pick'em segment this week. We're very thankful for Brandon coming on. He's very loved by the whole entire Colorado fan base community. If you don't know who Brandon is, definitely give him a follow on Twitter. We'll put his tags and stuff below too. But got to follow him everywhere, because Brandon is he's literally wired, fired, and inspired all the time with everything Colorado related. Brandon already knows that. But can't thank you enough for coming on today, Brandon. We appreciate it. But
dive into some games, man.
Yeah, I mean,
we had a great slate last week, and then this week it's even better. Like we were talking about it, when the week started. There's a bunch of games to choose from, and it was hard choosing which 7 games we were going to pick, because there's some games not on our thing, like Florida, LSU, some others that we're not picking, but they're still very interesting, very good games.
Yeah, lots of games with big implications this week. And we're going to start off right away in the ACC. You've got unranked Duke headed to number 24 North Carolina. Obviously, this is the battle of the Victory Bell. UNC has won the past 4 times, I'm pretty sure. Last year, UNC came back at Duke and won 38-35. This game's different though for me, because you got to taking a look at everything going on with Duke's offense more specifically. Obviously, Riley Leonard has been injured throughout this season. He's projected to still be out this upcoming week. Last week, Duke had a true freshman start at quarterback. His name's Grayson Loftus. After Henry Beelan, their usual second-string quarterback, was out, and he didn't really have that great of a first game. He threw a pick. He had one fumble too. Had one passing touchdown, but didn't do anything to throw off the charts last week when Duke played. And the big thing for me in this game is, yes, UNC and Duke both have 2 conference losses. I don't think either of these teams are going to win the ACC. They're kind of already out of the conversation because Louisville and FSU are already at the top of that conversation. But for me, this is where it comes down to. Duke's defense has allowed 7 rushing touchdowns over the last 3 games. And in the first 6 games, they only allowed 4 rushing touchdowns. So they have been on a downhill spiral. They can't stop the run defense. And you look at UNC, and who's their running back? Amarian Hampton, who leads the ACC in rushing yards, leads the ACC in rushing touchdowns. And I just think we're at a point where, yes, UNC and Duke have both kind of been falling off a little bit. UNC's coming off a win against Campbell last week, but I think UNC comes out on top here. I think their rushing game is going to dominate Duke's defense, and I think UNC comes out on top at home.
In honor of basketball season having started this week, this is usually a rivalry you discuss in basketball. You never hear from these teams playing each other in football, so the fact that we're discussing this as a football game is pretty cool to me. But both of these teams, like you said, have been on kind of a downhill. Like North Carolina, had 2 bad losses. Duke is taking their lumps as well, but they're both still very good. Even though these 2 teams don't control their own destiny when it comes to the ACC championship game, they still have some dominoes to fall their way if they want to face Florida State, who's already clinched a spot in the ACC title game. One of them still have to win this game. I think with the Tar Heels being at home, Drake May, he's still Drake May. He's still very good. Like Amari Hampton, pretty good. I like the Tar Heels at home, so I'm gonna pick the Tar Heels. I'm with you.
I'm also picking North Carolina. I just don't think they're going to lose to their rival Duke. I mean, especially after they lost to Georgia Tech and Virginia, they're going to be hungry from those losses, and they'll just want it more than Duke will. So I'm going to say North Carolina by at least 3 scores.
Oh, okay. I honestly agree with you. I'm pretty sure the spread for this game is like 14.5, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, something like that.
It was pretty high. It was pretty high.
I could see it being close at halftime, and then like as the second half goes along, North Carolina kind of starts to pull away. I mean, I don't know about 3 scores, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is by multiple scores.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe like 2, or maybe like 10 points or something like that.
Yeah, most definitely. But staying in the ACC, going to another big matchup in the ACC. Obviously, we've got unranked Miami headed to number 4 Florida State. Florida State is hungry for the college football playoff this year. I can't remember the last time they were in the playoff. I think it may have been like 2014. Yeah, the first year.
They got throttled by Oregon.
Yep, and then that year, Bama got throttled by Ohio State.
1-score game, not being throttled.
Hey, he still got throttled. But speaking of this Miami-Florida State game, this is an interesting game as well because you look at Miami. Miami had high hopes going into this year. They're 6-3 right now, 2-3 in conference play. Last week lost at NC State 20-6. And their 2 wins prior to that were overtime games where they beat Virginia and they beat Clemson, both in overtime. Tyler Van Dyke's obviously a great quarterback. Miami has a great secondary. And that's where I think it's kind of the difference maker for Florida State, because Florida State obviously completely dominant. They have Keon Coleman. They have Johnny Wilson. And actually, I'm pretty sure Johnny Wilson is questionable going into this game.
I think he's like a game time
decision. It is. It's a game time decision. And those are 2 phenomenal wide receivers that Jordan Travis puts all of his trust into. Yeah. And Jordan Travis will throw them up one-on-ones all the time, giving complete trust to his receivers. And that's where it's questionable for me because Miami's defense is pretty solid. They have a very good secondary. And the big thing for me here is that Miami's defense is 10th in the nation in sacks right now. They have 30 sacks through their 9 games, and Florida State's O-line is in like the top 20 for giving up the most sacks this year. So that's where it kind of dwindles in for me is if Miami's defense can make that step up and kind of throw Jordan Travis a little off guard, but I don't think that they can. I think Miami's going to give them a run for their money in the first half. I think it'll be a really close game then, and I think second half, Florida State pulls away, Florida State on top.
Oh, I really want to pick Miami here because it does help Bama out. If Bama wins out, they'll need some other things to fall to kind of get into that fourth or third or fourth spot. But Florida State's like a boa constrictor. They slowly, like, even when the game's not going their way, first half or for 3.5 quarters, they'll find a way to. They found ways to win in the end, like against Boston College, against Virginia Tech. They found ways to win. They just know how to grind teams, and despite having great receivers, they also have other talent. That they're Benson, their running back, and then you have of course you still have Jordan Travis who can use his legs. You have Jaheim Bell at tight end, and their defense is still pretty good. I really want to pick Miami, but I can't. It's in Tallahassee. I'm going with the Seminoles.
I mean, I just don't know if Miami really has that much of a chance. Yes, it's a rivalry game, and Miami's been practicing for this game their entire year. They want to beat the Seminoles really badly, but I just don't think Jordan Travis and company will let that happen. So I think the Seminoles will continue to roll and win by. Yeah, they'll beat the Hurricanes.
They'll get the job done.
And this was another 14-point spread where it could possibly be by multiple scores. I got now, as y'all had North Carolina big in the last game, I have Florida State big in this one. Probably by a
And
lot.
I actually saw something. I didn't put this in my own notes, but Florida State has covered the spread in 10 straight games, and they have complete. I was literally looking at something, and it was just going in depth about how much. And then I think it was like 6 of their last 10 games, they beat their opponents by like 14 plus points, something like that. Florida State has been getting the job done and has been making their case for the college football playoff this year, obviously. But jumping out of the ACC, we're going to go to a matchup that Bryant obviously wants to talk about. You see him wearing his jersey. You hear him keep talking about Bama. We got number 8 Bama headed to Kentucky. Obviously, Kentucky 6-3, 3-3 in conference. Kentucky's lost 3 of their last 4. But you got to think 3 of those last 4 games that they have lost did come to the 3 top teams in the SEC East, which is Georgia, Tennessee, and Mizzou. But
now they're going against the best team in the SEC West.
Exactly. So it's very tough for them. Kentucky has never beat a Nick Saban-led team, which is the other big thing. And you look at Jalen Milroe's performance last week. Obviously got it done passing, but got it done with his legs, which I know you want to talk about too.
4 rushing touchdowns.
4 rushing touchdowns. Literally an insane performance by Jalen Milroe. Exactly what you want to see as a Bama fan for Bama facing off against LSU. Crazy game. And this is the game that Bama needs to win to be on top of the SEC West and automatically get that bid to the SEC Conference Championship game. And so I think Bama wins this game with ease. I know it's at Kentucky, but I don't think Kentucky's even going to show up. The only game changer that I could possibly see is if Ray Davis has a game, because Ray Davis is a phenomenal running back, but I still don't see Kentucky being able to get it done against Bama.
So Bama's a 10-point favorite in this game, which is a little low in my opinion, but it is on the road still. Kentucky desperately needs a win. But Devin Leary would have to. Kentucky's so one-dimensional, and they've shown that in every game they've played. Even games they've won, they've relied on Ray Davis. They've relied on the running game. They've relied on their defense. But you can't be one-dimensional against Bama. You saw that. You've seen that multiple times this year. When Texas beat Bama, they were able to beat Bama on the ground and through the air. LSU had a lot of success against Bama's defense being balanced, but to me, it just comes down to this Bama offense. It's finally kind of starting to hit its stride. Jalen Milroe's coming into his own. It seems like, and somebody said this on one of their shows the other day. I think it was maybe On 3 or 247. Jalen Milroe is, at the beginning of the season, they were running Tommy Rees's offense. I think this is Jalen Milroe's offense. They finally tailored to his strengths, which was his legs. And it paid off, especially against LSU in a big-time game. I got the Tide. Roll Tide. We clinch a spot in the SEC championship game. Roll Tide.
It's hard to pick against Alabama, and I'm not going to start that today. Bama's going to win easily. Especially after they dominated the second half against LSU last week.
Yeah, there's not much you can say to go against them.
And as I said earlier in the show, this is like to me, this is like one of the most fun I've ever had. Like most fun and like most anxious, like intense I've ever watched the Bama team because they have like in the past you've seen Bama teams when Bama went up against a LSU or Ole Miss or even the tougher teams. You assumed Bama was going to win. You assumed Bama was going to dominate the game. This year it's been different. Bama's won more games by one score in one season than they have ever with Nick Saban as their head coach. And so it's been fun to watch them find a way to win each week and find different ways to win. And that's just well, I personally, even if they don't win national championship this season, which they probably won't, this has probably been one of my favorite teams to watch. And so
I mean, especially with the growth that you've seen
yeah.
through Milroe, obviously, like first couple of weeks, unsure what was going on with him, and you've seen him grow tremendously, which is exciting for you to look forward to next year. Because obviously, but now going a little bit more closer to Brandon's stomping grounds, moving out west for our fourth game of the day. You got number 18, the Utah Utes, headed to number 5, Washington. This is a big game for Washington because you got to think, obviously, they've been just outside of that college football playoff cusp at the 5th spot. They're the last 2 out, and they're in the last 2 out, obviously.
Bama and Oregon.
Yeah, exactly. And they beat Oregon at home 3-4 weeks ago. And you go into this game, Utah's 7-2, 4-2 in conference, and Washington's obviously 9-0, 6-0 in conference. The big thing for me in this game is that Utah has a top 10 defense. And I think that's going to work to their advantage in this game because obviously Washington has a top 5 offense in the whole entire country. But I don't think that Michael Penix has played as good of a defense as Utah's quite yet. And that's where I think this game boils down to is the fact that Utah has a very disciplined secondary. You've seen their secondary dominate all year against top receivers. And I think that's the difference maker. I think Utah can shut down Roma Dunze, or however you say his name. I think that they will do a great job. They're obviously extremely disciplined. But the other thing that comes down to it for me is Washington is 112th in defensive success rate, and they're horrible against the run. We've seen it all year. Teams can run it up their defensive. They just run up the gut. Their opposing offensive lines can create holes for other running backs. And if Utah's offense can stay on the field and feed Jaquindon Jackson, and if Bryson Barnes has the type of game that he had at USC 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I think Utah wins this game. And right now I'm picking Utah to upset Washington on the road. Jaquindon Jackson has a phenomenal game. Washington's college football playoff hopes are gone.
If there's an undefeated team in the top 5 to lose a game before their conference championship, outside of Michigan and Ohio State, because they'll play each other last week of the season, I think it'd be Washington. Since the Oregon game, they haven't really played up to where they expected. They let USC hang around. Their defense is not there, like you said. I mean, it's kind of on par with USC's defense. It's still not as bad, but it's still they're still an offensive minded team. And as a Bama fan, I need some help. So I've been rolling with the Utes all season. So I'm going with the Utah Utes going into Washington and pull off the upset.
You see, this is where it gets fun. You see, I know Utah's won the Pac-12 for the past 2 years. I know they have a dominant defense and a dominant offense, but I don't know if I can pick against Washington at home. I don't know if I can do it. I think Michael Penix Jr. is the Heisman candidate favorite, so I'm rolling with the Huskies to win this one.
Yeah, see, that's where it comes down to too, because Michael Penix obviously has been elite all year, but to me, I don't think he's played as good of a defense as Utah has, and that's why I'm rolling.
But we all thought Oregon had a pretty good defense.
We did,
and he shredded Oregon.
Yeah, we said that at the same time. Yeah, 5 weeks ago? Said,
so it would not shock me in the slightest if Washington beat Utah as bad as Oregon did. But I think Oregon. I think Utah matches up better against Washington than they did Oregon. So that's why I'm picking the Utes. I mean, other than the fact that as a Bama fan, we need help.
Yeah, but now jumping out of the Pac-12, temporarily going back to the SEC. This is a big matchup this week too. Obviously, yeah, I think this is one of the most underrated matchups of the week. I mean, obviously, it's getting a lot of hype. But I think a lot of people. So we have
Number of the year.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Well, as an SEC fan, of course, you're going to say that. But number 9, Ole Miss headed to number 2, Georgia. And it doesn't get any better than this. Obviously, Georgia last week handled business against Mizzou. They beat them 30-21. I wouldn't necessarily say they handled business, but they got the job done. They did what they needed to do. Carson Beck is continuing to get better and better every week. Dejon Edwards. And they have an extremely explosive offense. And you saw that last week. They held, and their defense too, held Luther Burden to like 3 receptions for 53 yards. And Luther Burden is one of the better wide receivers in college football right now. They completely threw back they just completely stopped Brady Cook from getting anything going offensively too. And that's where it boils down to is Georgia's defense in this game. The other thing is obviously Ole Miss is really good. They're number 9. But this is Lane Kiffin's first time playing against Georgia in his career at Ole Miss.
These teams don't play a lot.
Exactly, they don't. And the thing for me is, like James Franklin, Lane Kiffin kind of has a similarity to James Franklin in the SEC. Lane Kiffin is 1-5 against top 10 teams while he's at Ole Miss. And that's where it comes down to it for me is Lane Kiffin hasn't been able to really get the job done against top elite teams like this. He's never played Georgia. He's going to Athens in this game. I think that it can be a close game. Wide receiver Trey Harris will be back. Their tight end Caden Price-Horn will also be back, which is huge for them offensively. But they barely squeaked by A&M last week. They won by 3. And I don't think Ole Miss is going to be able to get the job done in Athens this week.
So, like I said all season, I predicted Georgia to slip up at some point in the season. I don't think it's now. I like Ole Miss's chances because other than the 2020 season, where Ole Miss did have a good year, and then 2021 they also had a good year with Matt Corral. Like you said, Lane Kiffin has this thing where he wins game he loses games down the road that he shouldn't. And so far, he's 8-1. Only loss coming to Bama at Bama. They've handled business everywhere else. They have probably the most balanced offensive attack that Georgia will have seen all year. They got Jackson Dart who can use his legs and move. Quinshon Judkins, one of the best running backs in the SEC. But I don't know if Ole Miss will have enough defensively to stop that offense. Even with now, there are rumors that Brock Bowers could suit up in this game. I don't think so. I think they're saving him for the SEC championship game. I mean, why not? If you win this game, you're in. You can save Brock Bowers till then, and make sure he's good and healthy. But I like the Bulldogs here at home. But I think it's close. I think Georgia wins by like a touchdown.
I was going to pick Ole Miss until I saw that the stat of the Ole Miss's defense is ranked 160th in total yards allowed in the country. So I'm going to stick with the back-to-back reigning defending national champions, even without their tight end playing. So Georgia by at least a touchdown.
Oh, yeah. I would definitely agree. But now, matchup number 6 of the day. Before we get to Colorado, going back to my stomping ground, the one Big Ten matchup of the week. Obviously, this might be one of the biggest matchups, but arguably with Ole Miss at Georgia, this is probably the other biggest matchup of the week. You got number 3 Michigan headed to number 10 Penn State in Happy Valley. Obviously, they got
shame that it's not a night game.
That's what I was about to say. Penn State got snubbed that this is not a night whiteout game. Very unfortunate.
Screw you, big noon kickoff.
Yeah, seriously. But looking at this game, you've got Michigan, number 1 total defense in the country. Penn State, number 2 total defense in the country. Big defensive teams. Obviously, Penn State has 1 loss coming to Ohio State 2-3 weeks back. And this is a big game for Penn State because obviously you got to think about the fact James Franklin is like 2-20 against top 10 teams. He can never, ever get the job done. And his offense completely lacked the explosiveness that they showed all season when they played OSU. And that's where it boils down to me is the fact that Penn State's in need of some huge plays if they want to win this game. Because this Michigan defense has been able to get done. Obviously, this is Michigan's first ranked game of the year where they're playing
their first actual big test. They played a joke that was scheduled to this point. It's just and they've had to cheat to do it.
Exactly.
It's a whole other discussion.
But so that's the big thing for me is if Drew Aller can have an all right game, because against Ohio State, Drew Aller had a horrible game. They were like 1 for 16 on third downs, god awful. If they can get the ball to Keandre Lambert-Smith, their number 1 wide receiver who's been tearing it up all year, I think they can win this game. And also, you got to think about the fact they lead the country in sacks per game. They get over 4 sacks a game. If they can pressure J.J. McCarthy, I think that's also a game changer. But you got to think about the fact, obviously, Michigan, they're number 3. They beat James Franklin. While Michigan's been in the top 10, they beat James Franklin every time they've played him. That's 4 times. But the big thing for me in this game is it's in Happy Valley. Can Michigan shrug off this investigation of the sign stealing? And can James Franklin finally get this top 10 win at home against a huge matchup? And I'm going against Michigan. All odds on Penn State, man. I'm picking Penn State. Drew Aller to show up, shut all the haters up about how he played against Ohio State. I'm rooting for Drew Aller in this game. And I got Penn State winning this game, probably in double overtime.
Okay, so if this were a night game, if this was a night whiteout game in Happy Valley, I might agree with you. And I think this will be a close game because this is Michigan's first true test of the season. They've been able to skate by or cruise by every team they played to this point. Now they played some all right competition, like they played Rutgers, they played who Ohio State struggled with, by the way. They played Maryland, who Ohio State struggled with, by the way.
Hey, guess what? You can't even say that because Georgia last year, when they were number 1, they struggled with teams like Mizzou.
That was last year.
Exactly. I'm just telling you, it happened.
That was last year. Anyway, I just think Michigan has too much. I still think they're a very good football team, even with the schedule they played. I think Jim Harbaugh has done a pretty good job since all this has come out about the sign stealing scandal, the investigation, and everything. And it seems like something new comes out just about every day. I still think he's done a great job of getting his players ready to play each week and not having that distraction. So I like the Michigan Wolverines to go out here and get a dub and stay undefeated. I mean, as an Ohio State fan, I thought maybe you'd want Michigan to remain undefeated when y'all face them, so that way y'all can break their hearts even more. But I guess not. I guess you want them to come in there or to whoop y'all. So I mean, I don't know. Who knows? But I'm going with the Wolverines.
I'm gonna agree with one of you guys, and that's Josh. I think James Franklin does have trouble beating top teams, but not this week. I think that they will sneak into the college football playoff top 6 after this week because of this win, and jump over the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I do think that Penn State wins this game by a field goal in double overtime.
I'm happy you said that, Brandon, because I mean, also too, you got to think about the fact. Think about all the fuel to the fire that Penn State is getting this week, just because of the fact all the media is doing is talking crap about James Franklin. That's like every headline about the fact that he can't beat tough.
Well,
and it's true.
To be fair, more people are talking crap about Michigan right now because of the sign stealing.
But that's the other thing, though, too, is will Michigan be able to get over that mental leap of – I mean, and I think it's really not on the players. I really don't think the players are thinking too much about it. But we'll see. And that leads us into our last game that I know Brandon's really hyped about. You got number 21 Arizona headed to Folsom Field in Colorado, taking on the Buffaloes. Obviously, this is a big game for both teams. For Brandon, obviously, Colorado's 4-5, 1-5 in conference, still looking to get a bowl game. There's 3 games left on the year. They need to win 2 more. So this is a must-win. This is a must-win situation for Colorado. I think the odds are in their favor more than people will give it to them because of the fact that they've lost 5 of their last 6. And I know Brandon's not happy about that. I know no one's happy about that. Obviously, last week had a brutal loss to Oregon State, coming from behind, lost by 1 touchdown, and which obviously I know Brandon also wasn't happy about. But you got to look at Arizona. Arizona's 6-3, 4-2 in conference. They're coming off a big upset over UCLA, which is huge.
Yeah,
they literally beat them by 17 points, demolished. Noah Fafita, their quarterback, their one McMillan wide receiver, he went off. They've been connecting very well lately. And obviously, Colorado has been struggling on defense. And I know Brandon knows that too. But I do think that this is Colorado's game to win. I think they shock everybody. I think they pull this one off. I know like 3-4 weeks ago, I said, will Colorado win another game this year? And I was questioning that. I think this is their game to win. They'll have 5 games on the year. They'll be 5-5 overall, and then they need one more win going into the last 2 weeks to be bowl eligible. I think Shedeur goes off this game, has a crazy game. Obviously, last week, I mean, he's been going off every year, but last week he only passed for like 235 yards or something like that. And I think that Colorado wins this game by 10 points.
Okay, so this is one of the toss-up for me. I've been kind of going back and forth. I really like what Jed Fish has been doing in Arizona this season. No one really kind of expected them to be in the conversation this much. They're not in the college football playoffs conversation, but they still kind of are in the Pac-12 conversation. They only have 2 conference losses. They've been in close games. They've been in close games with Oregon. Have been in close games with Washington, and should have beat USC, but didn't. They knocked off Oregon State. They knocked off UCLA. But I think Colorado will be motivated here. They want to get bowl eligible. And even if, let's say, they weren't to get bowl eligible, this first season for Dion has already been a success. He's more than doubled your win total from last year. You've proved to people that even with, a lot of transfers, even with, not a lot of depth, he can still be competitive. Like I said before, it'll take Dion a little bit of time to get his recruits in, get his team in. I'm sorry, Brandon, but I think Arizona. Like I said, I really like what Arizona's been doing. I think Arizona goes into Folsom Field and comes out with a close win in overtime. I think Colorado takes it. It's very competitive. I think they take Arizona to overtime. I think it's like a field goal or something. Arizona comes out with it, man. I'm sorry. I really like what Arizona's been doing.
Brian, we're all wrong at times, and I think that this is your one time that you're going to be wrong. But I think what you guys,
I hope I am wrong. I'll be honest with you. I hope I am wrong.
What you need to take into consideration is that Shedeur's been really banged up these past couple of weeks, and I think that with I don't really like that Pat Shurmur took over plays. I'm going to be real on that, but I think Sean Lewis should have stayed in the plays, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But I think that the offensive line is going to be able to. Offensive line did play better last week against Oregon State, and Shedeur did play really well in the fourth quarter. If you take away that awful play calling right before the half, we have a chance at winning that game because we lost by 7, and that awful play calling did lead to the touchdown right before the half, and we lost by 7 because of that, I believe. But I do think that we will, for the first time in the Coach Prime era, play a full game we will start fast. I believe our offensive line will play really well, and I do believe we will be able to force turnovers and actually capitalize on them, unlike we've been doing these past couple of weeks. But I think that we will win by 10 points.
It's exactly
we'll win by 10 points.
Heck yeah, and I think exactly going back to what you said with the offensive line too, one stat that stood out to me that I found when I was doing a little bit of research. Colorado's offense, I know you probably already know this and you don't even want to hear it. They've given up 662 yards of penalties off of 84 violations this year, putting them at number 2 in the country.
That bugs the living heck out of me.
Yeah, but
they've also given up the most sacks in the country.
But I think this is the game where that changes, though, too, for Brandon. Like what Brandon was saying, I think this will be Dion's first full game where Colorado goes out swinging and stays swinging the whole game.
I just don't understand, as a Denver Broncos fan who had to deal with Pat Shurmur the last several years before they brought in Hackett and then they brought in Peyton.
I like Sean Lewis.
How in the heck you turn over your play calling abilities to Pat Shurmur, who is
we were scoring 32.5 points with him. Sean Lewis, we were scoring 32.5 points with Sean Lewis.
I'm not a big fan of Pat Shurmur because of how bad his offenses were in Denver. So
I don't like him either. I'm sorry. Sean Lewis is better.
Well,
I agree with that.
We'll see how it plays out. Obviously, Brandon wants Colorado to win this game, and I kind of want to see Colorado win this game too. And I want to see Penn State upset Michigan.
I want to see Colorado win. But I got to go with my gut here. I'm sorry. I want to see Miami knock off Florida State. I want to see Utah knock off. I want to see Penn State knock off Michigan. I just don't think it's going to happen. I mean,
I want to see Kentucky beat Alabama.
But this week we all combined did pick a ton of upsets. Lots of upset picks out here. I mean, more specifically, me and kind of Brandon too.
We also had a lot of games in which we agreed on too.
Exactly.
I mean, some of these games, while they're rivalry games, they're still the better team should win. Like North Carolina, Duke, like Miami, Florida State, and Alabama, Kentucky.
Exactly. But that's going to do it for our Week 11 Pick'em segment. We cannot thank Brandon enough for coming on and joining us for this Pick'em segment today. Obviously, Brandon is a diehard Colorado fan. If you don't know who Brandon McCartney is, go check him out on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere, because I don't think I've ever met a more passionate Colorado fan than Brandon. I've never even
more passionate college football fan. I mean, there are people who love college football. I love college football. I mean, I eat, sleep, breathe it as much as the next guy, but I mean, he's as passionate as they come.
And going back to like Colorado seasons over the years, and I know Brandon doesn't want to talk about that. This man has stayed with them through thick and thin. And the second Dion came, I remember Brandon was posting all of his hype videos, and people were commenting on them, calling him crazy because they're like, "What is this kid doing?" And they didn't realize that Brandon has been with Colorado through the thick and the thin for over 20 years. Like since he's been born, he's born into this. And
he bleeds the Buffalo blood.
He does. And I mean, Colorado's time is coming soon. But so if you don't know who Brandon McCartney is, check him out.
That is until Dion replaces Nick Saban at Bama.
Whatever you say. Whatever. Stop trying to stir the pot. But Brandon's socials, I am wired, fired, and inspired.
Why do you think he does the Aflac commercials? Him and Dion, what do you think they talk about on the Aflac sets?
Hey,
We'll
Brian.
see. We'll see. But
Hey, Brian. Want to trade Coach Prime for Nick Saban?
yeah, you guys can just do a little trade.
No, I think Nick Saban's got a couple more seasons in him.
NCAA swap. I don't think Nick Saban wants to go up in the cold. I don't think he can handle
No,
it.
he don't like the cold.
But that's going to do it for this week's episode. We can't thank Brandon enough. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see how many picks we get right. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment. Brandon's probably going to be commenting on this too, giving his opinions on our takes.
He'll
right
be
after
keeping
being
the
on.
receipts of me picking Arizona. He'll probably screenshot it,
Go for his head on Twitter. But can't thank you enough, Brandon. We thank you for coming on today. And tune in for
Thanks
next
for
week's
having me.
episode 33 coming up next week. So.